welcome back to AR77. Today we've got another one of my guide videos, if you will. These videos are really aimed at people who are new to air pistols, and specifically replica air pistols, to go through some of the basics, to help you make an informed decision when you part with your well-earned cash and decide to buy a new pistol. Maybe it's your first one, maybe you're just starting out and you're kind of weighing up the pros and cons. What sort of pistol would I like to get? I've done one on, kind of pellets and how to load your CO2 and how to load your BBs and stuff. But I've not done one on the difference between revolvers and what you might call semi-automatic pistols, or replicas of revolvers, replicas of semi-automatic pistols. So I thought I'd just make a few key distinctions between the two different kind of types, and again specifically from an air pistol perspective. So some of these things will carry over to real world firearms, I'm sure, some of these comparisons, but specifically I'm talking to air pistol shooters out there. So we'll start off with BBs. Let's talk about BB guns, because generally 4.5mm BB air pistols, replica air pistols, there's a lot more of them to start with, and when I say more of them, there's more variety, I would suggest, and they tend to be a little bit cheaper. So for instance, if you wanted to buy a pistol like the Colt single action army, the BB version would be usually a little bit cheaper, 10 or 20 quid cheaper than the pellet pistol version. Now that's nothing to do with revolvers or semi-autos, that's just generally, in general terms, the pellet versions tend to cost more. So I'm going to start with BBs, and then we'll touch upon kind of different pistols later on. And we'll perhaps talk a little bit about pellet pistols and the difference between pellet revolvers and BB revolvers, and pellet pistols and pellet revolvers, so on and so forth. Anyway, let's get into it. So this in front of you is the rather gorgeous looking Umarex Colt Python. This is a replica of the full chrome version of the Python, and it is, as you can see, quite lovely. Kind of pretend wooden grips. They're not too bad, they're not amazing, you can tell that they are plastic, but yeah, it's a revolver at the end of the day. So things to know about revolvers. Well, the first thing I would say is, when you're shooting, it's capacity. It's the amount of ammunition you can fit in that gun. Does that really matter when you're buying a air pistol? Because you might say, well, I'm not going to use it for defense, I'm not going to use it in a situation where I would need a lot of ammunition. And that's quite right, you're absolutely right. So, like for instance with this, you've got typical of the majority of revolvers, and certainly the majority of air pistol revolvers, you have a 6-round capacity cylinder, if you will. That's you're going to fit 6 BBs in there. This is the shell loading revolver, so you put your BBs in the shells and then you load them up, and that's your gun loaded. But you're going to get 6 in there, as opposed to something like this. This is the Springfield Armory XDM. So this is a replica of a semi-auto striker-fired pistol, and to load this thing up, you've got the magazine here. Quite a nice magazine. I think it holds about 20 rounds, correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, I think roughly 20 rounds. Sometimes you might want to put less than that in if it feels like it's you're jamming it, but yeah, 20 rounds will go in there. So obviously more than double. Yeah. more than double, more than 3 times as much ammunition in that pistol. So why is it important? Well, it's the amount of times you want to reload, isn't it? You know, how often do you want to stop and reload? That's the question, really, when it comes to air pistols and ammunition. It's about how many shots you want to fire before you stop and reload that pistol. Now, what I would say is, you can get spare magazines for these, and you can get extra shell casings for these, so you can have some pre-loaded and ready to go. So that's a benefit, I suppose, if you wanted to do that. Although that's going to cost you money. For a spare magazine for something like this, you're looking at probably around 40-50 quid, I think. For some shells for this, I'm not sure, they're not always available everywhere, so I think you're looking at probably 30 quid for 6 more brass shells. I might be way off there, but I think last time I looked there were about 30 quid for 6 brass shells. Again, I might be way off, but probably cheaper to get 6 shells than it is to get another magazine, but another magazine will hold more ammunition. So there's that to consider. The other thing is, actually, when you look at a revolver, when you're kind of reloading that, it's actually quite nice to empty the shells out and put another BB in there. You stick the BB in the front on these ones, and just load those back up. There's a bit of pleasure to doing that. You know, it's quite a nice kind of, I use the term a lot, but quite a tactile thing. You know, it's quite relaxing, loading a pistol. But yeah, loading that up, really quite nice actually. So it's not a hardship. And actually, if you're buying these because you enjoy replicas, you'll enjoy the feel of doing something like that probably, because you go, actually, this feels like quite an authentic shooting experience. Likewise, you could argue with a semi-auto, it's quite nice. You know, it feels quite good to be able to throw a magazine in there, cock the pistol, and away you go. So again, pros and cons for both. But that's the main difference there between the revolvers and the semi-autos. You're going to get less ammunition in that than in that. But maybe that encourages you to pick your shots carefully, maybe concentrate on accuracy. Maybe you prefer something like this because you can fire a lot of shots off really quickly without having to reload. So reloading time, let's think about that then. How long is it going to take to reload? Well, as I said, you can have these preloaded. You can have extra shells for the revolvers. You can have extra mags for these. Reloading a mag, if you wanted to do that, it's pretty quick. You just pull the spring down and load your BBs in there. You can get speed loaded, so that happens quite quickly. But within a minute or two, you're fully reloaded and you're good to go. And actually, there's not much difference here, you know, especially with some of these revolvers. They come with different shells. Let me show you. Get that in there. Should be revolving it that way. Let me show you a different revolver, just to make the point. This is. Let's give it a bit of space all by itself because it's worthy of it. So this is the Colt Single Action Army revolver, again by Umrex, and the shells for this are slightly different. So again, it's a revolver, but the shells for this one, you stick the BB in the rear of the shell there. Let me just show you that. So if I put a shell out of there, so for this one, the shell doesn't go in the front. You can see where the kind of the plastic sort of washer thing is there. The BB goes into the back there. So with that in mind, let's just find my place again. With that in mind, you could argue that you don't really need to take the shell out of there. You could just stick a BB straight in the back, and load it that way, which might save you time. But again, on a pistol like that, some of the pleasure comes from you know, loading it up, getting those shells out, loading it back up, So it's part of the kind of the pleasure of the ownership of a replica pistol like that. So, bit of a different kettle of fish there. You could load it without taking the shells out, which might speed up your loading time. But, again, you can't just, you can't access all 6 all at the same time because of the way that this gun is. It's not a swing out cylinder, if you will, so it's kind of very traditional, very authentic. You'd have to rotate the cylinder each time and load each one separately. Let's just listen to that again. Oh yeah. Now it's time for me to watch Tombstone, I think, tonight. Or Unforgiven, or something of that ilk. Yeah, really, really nice pistol there by Umrex. So, there is a nice, decent range of different revolvers available. There's less variety, I would say. There's less variety when it comes to revolvers. There is some very nice ones around. There's, different finishes, different colours, and more variety than there has ever been before. But probably less variety when you come to revolvers as opposed to your semi-auto pistols, such as the Springfield. Again, from a replica point of view, this does everything that you would want it to do. This is full blowback. It will lock back after the last shot. That'll lock back like that. It's field strippable. It's a full-size, fully encased dropout metal magazine. Field strip it. Have I already said that? Possibly. It's field strippable. Everything operates as you would want it to. Got lovely sights on that. That's a great pistol, the Springfield Armory XDM. A bit of wear and tear there on the port, so it gets a lot of use. But you can see some really nice, authentic markings here. Some really nice kind of XDM markings etched into the slide there. That's a really nice pistol, and from a replica collector's point of view, that ticks a lot of boxes for me. As does, the Python 357 Magnum. You get the Colt horse there on the grip and just there. This does everything the revolver would do. It's got the swing out cylinder. It's got the shell cases that eject. Again, with the Colt single action army, that is as accurate as you can get, other than perhaps the hammer doesn't go all the way down. So I'm not sure if I think it would on the real steel. But these are lovely pistols, and from a replica point of view, they do everything that the real steel would do. Right, let me look at my list. So yeah, a bigger variety of semi-autos as opposed to revolvers. One thing you might want to consider is that if you're shooting a revolver, obviously your BBs go into your shells, and then you cock the pistol, and then you shoot the pistol, and within that there's very little to go wrong. So like in the real world firearms, very reliable platform is the revolver. Very reliable, very straightforward method. There's a reason it stood the test of time. These are also really reliable. From what I've seen, from my experience, the semi-autos rarely have any problems, but because you've got maybe, let's say, 20 rounds in there, and then it's got to go in here, and it's got to find its way up through here, and you've got a lot of moving parts in that slide there. There's more to go wrong. Obviously, they're field strippable, so you can get at them, you can push out any BBs that are jammed, but again, it's just a consideration. There's perhaps more to go wrong. It's probably you're more likely to get a jam, if at all, but you're more likely to get a jam on a semi-auto than you are on a revolver, in my experience. Shooting then, some of these will be, some of the semi-autos will be double action and single action, which means you can pull the trigger and it'll shoot, or you can back the slide and shoot like that. Obviously, once you've because they're blowback, so once you've fired like that, yeah, the slide will rack again as it cycles. You know, once you've shot the ball out, the BB out, that'll blow back. Get you ready for your next shot. So your next shot will be single action again. So really straightforward there. But it's that easy to shoot one of these. You just got to rack the slide and shoot. Same with a lot of them. Some will have a hammer at the back that you can cock. Some will shoot in double action, so you can pull the trigger and have that longer trigger pull and it'll shoot. This is a strike fire, so you don't have that option. With the revolvers, if it's a double action, like with Python here, you can do that longer trigger pull and shoot the pistol that way. It'll do the double action, it'll cock it and fire it, yeah. Or, of course, you can fire it in single action. I'll just show you what that does to the trigger, brings it back, and then you're ready for single action. Single action, you're probably going to be more accurate. It's going to take you a little bit longer, but you've only got 6 rounds, so make the most of it. Take the time to cock it, be accurate. Enjoy shooting a pistol like that. So it might take you a bit longer to shoot it, but that's a way of conserving ammo. Yeah, I would take the time. I'd take the time. Other things to consider if you're a replica collector is the credibility or authenticity. Obviously, with a blowback pistol like this, it's going to blow back each time it shoots, so you're going to get a bit of a feel of shooting a gun. It's going to have a little bit of recoil just based on that blowback. You're not going to get that with one of these, whereas in the real Python, that would blow, not blow back, but it would have a recoil because of the explosion happening inside the pistol and the kind of the everything that comes out at the end of there, as well as the bullet. But what's happening here is that little explosion, and you're going to have a little bit of a recoil. You won't get that on the air pistol version because it's just CO2. It doesn't create a lot of force. Having said that, the other side of that coin is you probably get more CO2 because you're shooting less ammunition each time. Every time you reload, your CO2 is going to get a chance to warm up. You might get better feet per second off it. And you're not using that CO2 to blow back the slide like you are on the semi-auto. So you might get better use out of your CO2. You might get more rounds, more shots per cylinder, per CO2 cylinder. So there you go. Yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell, or a 20-minute nutshell, albeit. That's kind of the differences between these pistols. Some are single. That's what I didn't mention. Other revolvers, like the single action, when you're shooting that, you're going to have to bring that back each time because there is no double action function. So that's purely single action. Each time you're going to have to cock that. But who doesn't want to do that? I don't know. Show me somebody who doesn't enjoy doing that every time, and I'll show you a liar. Hard to fan these guns. When you see it in the cowboy films, and you fan the pistol, you just keep the trigger down there, and bang, 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 bang. I think it can be done. I've never tried it with this. I don't want to wreck it, and I feel like there's a chance you might if you do that. Anyway, yeah, there you go. Let me move on to a slightly different area then, as we talk a little bit more about the differences between those revolvers, which are BB style revolvers, and pellet revolvers, like this little beast. This is the Umrex Legends S25. Very similar in many ways to something like the Python there. Again, you've got your cylinder. This one happens to be loaded with with pellets here. But yeah, so you've got a pellet pistol there and a BB pistol there. Pellet pistol exactly the same. Exactly the same, really. The only difference is the ammunition. You're putting pellets in this one, and as you can see in this one, the pellets load in from the rear, just like in the single action army, with the BBs loading from the rear. You can get some pellet pistols where the shells demand that you load them in at the front of the shell. But it's the same thing. Some BBs load at the rear of the shell, some BBs load at the front of the shell. Some pellets load at the rear of the shell, some pellets load at the front of the shell. But loading the pistol is essentially the same. What you might get from a revolver that's a pellet revolver is a little bit more accuracy, because it's going to have a rifled barrel. I don't know if you can see any rifling in there. Can we see any rifling in there? Yeah, a little bit. Just there, you can see the start of the rifling. So, yeah, you might get a bit more accuracy, especially if you get a pellet pistol. Pellets tend to be more accurate than BBs anyway. If you get a pellet pistol that has a rifled barrel and a long barrel like this, then you're looking at probably quite an accurate pistol. You can get the single action army with a rifled barrel in pellet. So that would be, in my opinion, one of the more accurate airgun replicas. I would have thought. I don't have it, so I don't know. But I would have thought. So, let's look at semi-autos then. Got too many pistols on the table here. Let's see what I've got. Right, so yeah, semi-auto. So let's have a look at this lovely pistol here. So that is the Beretta 92FS pellet pistol by Umarex. And there's the Springfield XDM for comparison. Now this is a replica of a semi-automatic pistol, which in the real world would fire in double action or single action. You could rack the slide and shoot that in semi-automatic, but actually you can't do that with this pistol, because the way that this pistol is made, as it happens, is that it's a revolver, actually. You slide that open like that. You get, let's see, do I have one? I've got one loaded up because I'm having a bit of a pellet day today, which is why the S25 is loaded as well. You get these kind of discs for your pellets, and that sits in there. Then you close the slide and you're ready to go. So you can shoot it double or single action, but you're never going to get blowback from it. So even though it looks like a semi-automatic pistol, when you're buying a pellet replica, often they are not just, but often they are revolvers. So you kind of bear that in mind. With that though, comes the benefit that you get from any revolver, which is you're going to see more out of your CO2 cylinder, aren't you? The downside being the capacity of this is still only 8 rounds. So it's higher than the 6 that you'd get in the Python or the single action army, but it's still only, although it looks like a semi-automatic, it's an 8 round revolver pistol, really, dressed up as a semi-auto. There are some that have a bit of blowback, like this. This is the PX4 Storm by Beretta and by Umarex. This is the blowback pellet pistol. So this will blow back each time, and it will give you a slightly easier trigger pull. You can shoot it double action as well, like that. But when it blows back, it does. You still got to cycle, but it gives you a slightly easier trigger pull. You can cock the hammer and shoot it like that. Gives you a slightly easier trigger pull, but not what I would call proper single action, because you can hear that. When you hear that noise, what you're doing essentially is, although it has like a stick magazine here, it's still a revolver. Yeah, so all you're doing is, when you hear that click, you're cycling that kind of disc there, that kind of cylinder, if you will. So that's going around just like it would in something like that. or in fact something like that. So this is again a pellet pistol, but it's perhaps a bit closer to a replica of a semi-auto. You've got the mag that drops out, you've got a bit of blowback, but it's still ultimately a revolver. It's an 8-round revolver, or 16 really, because you've got 8 there, then you can take it out, spin that round, and then pop it back in. But again, still a revolver dressed as a semi-auto. There's another type, obviously, which is more like this. This is my SIG P320 M17, I guess you'd call it, as its full name. This is, again, a bit more realistic because this one has got the cut-out ejection port. It will blow back. You can rack the slide. It doesn't do much to change the trigger pull, so it's not really kind of accurate in terms of the trigger pull there. But it's not a revolver either. If you look at this magazine, I've shown this a few times on a couple of videos. This is different system again. This has this kind of belt-fed system going on here. So while it's not a revolver, it's more like a belt-fed type pistol. The benefit of that is, although it's can't put it straight back in, can I? I've got to put it in the magazine. Although it's not kind of accurate to how an actual semi-automatic pistol magazine works, what it does mean is you got your pellets, but you've also got that round count. Your capacity is drastically increased there. I think that carries 20 rounds. You can get some. I think the original P320 by SIG, the pellet pistol, I think that carries 30 rounds. Downside of that is, there's always a downside. The downside of that is you're probably more likely to get a jam. Again, these belt-fed magazines are like a bicycle chain. Things can go wrong. They can get stuck. If you use the wrong kind of pellets, they can jam quite easily. I tend to use flat-headed pellets, or what you might call wad cutters, because they sit nicely in the belts. They also sit nicely in these, if you're using one of those type pistols. They also sit nicely in these magazines as well. So wad cutters, I think, are the way to go if you're shooting a pellet pistol. Certainly one of the semi-automatic type pellet pistols. So I think that's covered everything that I wanted to talk about really, but in terms of the difference between revolvers and semi-autos from a BB perspective as well as from a pellet perspective. Hope I've given you some information that you can use when making your choices. You're spending your cash in the future. Ultimately, regardless of everything that I've said, let me just put some pretty guns up here. Regardless of everything that I've just said, it's up to you, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's your choice. Yeah, it's going to be down to your personal taste. What sort of pistols do you like? Do you like the look of the revolvers? Have you always wanted to own an authentic looking Peacemaker? Have you always wanted to own something modern and, blowback like the Springfield here? Or something more classic, like the Beretta? Or indeed the gorgeous Colt Python? Pay your money, take your choice. It's up to you. You will have a lot of fun deciding, I guarantee it. And hopefully even more fun shooting them. So please do stay safe when you're shooting. Look after yourselves, take care, like, subscribe, share, all of that malarkey. All the best. Bye.